Truistery Vibes warmly welcomes all our beloved listeners. We're so glad to see you again in our familiar time slot.
Today,
Truistery Vibes brings you a brand new story, one that we hope will touch your heart and stay with you. As you listen, feel free to leave a comment sharing the quote or moment that left the deepest impression on you. Wishing you a wonderful and meaningful listening experience. Seattle awoke to a gentle drizzle as the first light of dawn crept over Elliott Bay. In the heart of Capitol Hill, nestled between murals of Pacific Northwest evergreens and the occasional eucalyptus, stood Tranquil Waves Wellness, a boutique spa owned by Amanda Carter. At 30 years old, Amanda had transformed her passion for holistic healing into a sanctuary for stressed professionals. From deep tissue massages in artisan wood-walled rooms to guided breathwork sessions overlooking the city skyline. Every detail, from the reclaimed cedar floors to the soft amber glow of Himalayan salt lamps, spoke of calm, care, and intentional design. 2 blocks west, across busy Broadway, in a sleek glass and steel tower in Bellevue, worked Jason Miller, Amanda's estranged husband. A sharp-suited 35-year-old CEO of a rising artificial intelligence startup, Jason commanded boardrooms by day and navigated venture capital circles by night. His life was measured in quarterly earnings, acquisitions, and elevator pitches. Yet, despite millions in funding, he felt something lacking. 5-year-old Ethan Carter lived in between these worlds. Diagnosed with ADHD at age 4, Ethan's boundless energy crackled like electricity through the Carter household. His bright blue eyes sparkled with curiosity. He could name every SpaceX rocket launch and recite the Seattle Mariners' batting lineup, but his impulsivity had driven away 2 previous nannies in as many months. Broken plates, runaway grocery carts, and impromptu living room gymnastics had left Amanda sleep-deprived and desperate to find someone who could keep pace with her son's relentless imagination. Enter Zoe Bennett, 28, a former educator at Cascade Learning Center, an innovative nonprofit in Kirkland specializing in neurodiverse children. Zoe's resume boasted certifications in applied behavior analysis, experience leading small group social skills workshops, and glowing recommendations from occupational therapists. She lived in a sunlit studio near Green Lake, cycling to work each morning with a sturdy backpack filled with sensory toys, fidget tools, and pocket notebooks full of lesson plans. Their paths converged on a rainy Thursday. Amanda, hands full of Ethan's discarded rain boots and dripping umbrella, ushered Zoe through the spa's frosted glass doors. Zoe's water-resistant trench coat bore tiny patches of color from last night's improvised classroom painting session. She carried herself with quiet confidence and offered a warm, undaunted smile as Amanda introduced her to the spa's intimate entry vestibule. "Welcome to Tranquil Waves," Amanda said, ushering Zoe toward a plush reading nook stocked with children's books on mindfulness and simple keys that wheezed with each turn. "I'm so grateful you came today. This is Ethan." From behind the reception desk stepped a small figure. Ethan, wearing dinosaur slippers and clutching a steaming mug of oatmeal. Ethan's eyes widened at the sight of Zoe. He pounced, bellowing, "I'm 5. Watch me," then scampered across the lobby, sliding his slippered feet across polished concrete, scattering oat flakes in his wake. Zoe never flinched. "Hey there, buddy." She kneeled to his level, offering a bright orange silicone fidget spinner.
I'm Zoe.
"Can I spin this with you?" Ethan paused, curiosity upping his adrenaline, and placed the mug carefully on a side table. Never mind that freshly cleaned walls fumed with steam. Amanda exhaled, tension easing. "If you can keep your snack in one piece, I think we're off to a good start." The trial was set. Zoe would care for Ethan from 8 a.m. until 3 p.m., navigating tantrums, mid-morning meltdowns, and random bursts of hopping on furniture. In return, Zoe would ensure Ethan's safety, maintain a semblance of calm, and report back to Amanda with strategies and observations. By the end of that first hour, Zoe had already invented a quiet parachute game using a therapy sheet draped over chairs, calming Ethan enough to color inside the lines. redirected his sprint toward the reception desk into a race along marked floor stripes, complete with a self-timed stopwatch. Coached him through 3 deep breath exercises, each anchored by a playful count of rocket launches to Mars. Amanda watched through the glass panel of her treatment room, her heart lightening. It wasn't just Zoe's professional certifications that impressed her. It was the unwavering calm in Zoe's voice, the patient steadiness in her hands, and above all, the genuine spark of joy Zoe shared when Ethan congratulated himself on a task mastered. In Bellevue, Jason received a text from Amanda at 9:15 a.m. Ethan's already completed 2 early learning tasks. Zoe is incredible. Watch and learn winking face. Jason's phone buzzed again at 11 a.m. Quiet parachute game is a hit. I've never seen him sit still this long. A third ping arrived at 2:45 p.m. I'll be back by 3:30. Zoe has lunch under control. Feel free to grab dinner tonight. In that moment, Amanda felt hope blooming. Hope that her son could finally get the support he needed. Hope that she could reclaim a sliver of me time at her spa. And, deep down, hope that the fragile threads of her marriage to Jason might find new strength. As the clock struck 3 o'clock, Amanda stepped into the reception area to greet Zoe. Ethan bounded up, breathless but beaming, as Zoe stood to gather her coat. Ethan had another fantastic day, Zoe reported, smoothing out her trench coat. We built a cardboard rocket, practiced mindfulness bubbles, and read 2 new library books. Ethan threw his arms around Zoe in a fierce hug. Amanda blinked back a tear. As Zoe collected her things to leave, Amanda wondered if this bright, composed young woman could become more than just a caregiver. She wondered if, in the interplay between chaos and calm, Zoe might hold the key to restoring everything her family had lost. And so, in the soft Pacific Northwest rain, Tranquil Waves Wellness became the unlikely birthplace of a new chapter, one in which a mother's desperation, a child's boundless spirit, and a stranger's quiet competence intertwined to forge something entirely unexpected. The following morning, the skies cleared over Capitol Hill as sunlight filtered through rain-spattered windows. In the entryway of Tranquil Waves Wellness, Amanda waited nervously. Today would be Zoe's first full day alone with Ethan, and Amanda had devised a contained chaos exercise to see how Zoe would respond under pressure. Okay, Amanda instructed, her tone calm but firm. I want you to keep Ethan engaged for the next 30 minutes. When I ring the bell, she pointed to a small brass service bell on the reception desk. You'll respond immediately, drop whatever you're doing, and check on him. That bell signals an emergency in our test. Zoe nodded, lips curving into a confident smile. She understood. This trial would simulate real situations, unexpected meltdowns, shifts in routine that came with caring for a child with ADHD. Amanda lingered at the glass door of room 1, where she had set up 2 chairs facing each other and a low table scattered with craft supplies. On that table, she placed a steaming bowl of steel-cut oatmeal topped with berries and a dash of cinnamon, a breakfast favorite of Ethan's, but one notoriously easy to spill when fidgety hands were involved. Ethan bounded in, dinosaur-slippered feet skidding across the polished floor. He jabbered energetically, I want blue paint and red paint. Can we draw a rocket that flies to the moon? His eyes already danced with possibility and trouble. Zoe bent to his level, matching his energy. Absolutely. We'll need a big sheet of paper. Why don't you help me tape it to the floor over here? She spread a sheet of butcher paper across the tile and handed him a roll of painter's tape. Ethan tore off pieces, pressing the paper down like a makeshift canvas. Zoe guided him. Let's start by sketching rocket fins in pencil. You draw the nose cone. I'll draw the boosters. For 5 minutes, they co-created a rough outline, Zoe praising each bold line and zigzag. Then, just as Amanda had anticipated, Ethan's focus splintered. He rose, forgetting the tape, and marched toward the reception desk where her oatmeal bowl waited. In one exuberant gesture, he swept his arm out to point at a hand-painted mandala mural and knocked the bowl over. The oatmeal splattered across the desk and floor like a geyser. Time slowed for Amanda behind the glass. The test bell was silent. Was Zoe prepared? Zoe wheeled instantly, her instructor's instinct kicking in. She knelt at the desk side before the bowl, even stopped sliding. "Whoa, brother," she murmured to Ethan, voice gentle but commanding. "Let's handle this together. Can you help me sweep the big flakes into these dustpans?" She pressed 2 small dustpans and brushes into his hands. For the next minute, Zoe worked side by side with Ethan, modeling calm efficiency. "Oatmeal gets everywhere, huh?" she joked softly, edging closer, so he felt included. He looked at her, scraped more oats into the pan, then cracked a small grin, proud of his cleanup mission. Once the bulk of the mess was contained, Zoe fetched a damp microfiber cloth and quietly began wiping down the desk. Then she retrieved a mop and small bucket. "I'll do the rest. You go help Mrs. Carter with the rocket painting project." She waved him toward room 1. Ethan paused, then scampered back to the craft area. Zoe's swift redirection kept him moving forward rather than dwelling on the spilled breakfast. Amanda released her breath. Zoe had passed the first hurdle with grace. She had responded to a sudden crisis without flinching, safely engaged Ethan, and restored order while maintaining empathy. But there was more to observe. From the glass-paneled office, Amanda brought Zoe an extra cleaning towel. "Great job," she whispered as Zoe emerged. "He tries that with 2 other caregivers, and they'd have panicked or scolded him. You kept him calm and yourself, exactly what he needs." Zoe nodded, eyes bright but focused. "He's a curious kid. Spills happen. What matters is how you recover together." With the cleanup complete, Zoe led Ethan back to room 1 for a brief breathing break. She pulled out a small flute-shaped bottle of bubbles, a familiar coping tool she carried in her backpack. "Breathe in slowly, ready?" she demonstrated, inhaling. Then she gently blew bubbles, counting each one. 1, 2, 3. Ethan inhaled, exhaled, and watched the iridescent orbs drift skyward. Within 2 minutes, the tension in his shoulders had dissolved. He returned to the table, leaned over the penciled rocket, and added the first splash of crimson paint, carefully decanting the paint onto a palette and dabbing the brush into his chosen hue. Amanda emerged entirely to refill her coffee. As she directed camera eye style toward Zoe, she quietly recorded 2 clips, the swift apology Zoe offered to Ethan. "Sorry, buddy, my fault for not moving the bowl," and Zoe's encouraging words as Ethan painted. Back at the spa's break room, Amanda and Zoe reviewed the footage together. "I like how you apologized," Amanda noted. "That was natural, genuine." Zoe replayed the segment, adjusting her posture. "Sometimes a quick apology disarms a kid. That tells him we're on the same team." Amanda's final question. What would you do differently if he'd had an accident on the rug instead of the desk? Zoe thought a moment. Move him out of the messy zone, redraw his boundary, then model cleanup. Consistency helps him understand limits. Satisfied, Amanda hugged Zoe on the quick. "I've never seen Ethan so steady during a meltdown. You're exactly the kind of caregiver I've been searching for." Zoe smiled, but her eyes flicked toward Ethan, now happily dabbing violet paint onto the rocket's fins. She knew the praise was well-placed, but the true test lay ahead. In the unpredictable world of ADHD, tomorrow's challenge might be louder, faster, or more chaotic. Still, as Zoe strolled home past the vibrant murals of Pike/Pine, she carried a quiet confidence. Today she had not only built trust, she had laid the groundwork for a new pattern of calm, creativity, and collaboration. Tomorrow, the real adventure would begin, and she felt ready. Zoe Bennett walked home through the soft glow of string lights lining the streets of Capitol Hill, her mind a storm of conflicting emotions. In the rearview mirror of her cherry-red electric sedan, she replayed the day's events in vivid detail. There had been small triumphs, Ethan laughing as they traced the outline of a cardboard rocket, the way Jason Miller had glanced at her with genuine gratitude, but beneath each triumph lay a simmering current of envy she could no longer deny. From the moment she stepped into the Carters' modern Tudor-style home on Madrona Hills, Zoe had been struck by its warmth. Sunlight spilled through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating shelves of children's books, framed family portraits, and clusters of potted succulents. The aroma of lavender-infused elixir lingered in every hallway, a testament to Amanda Carter's devotion to creating a sanctuary. Zoe, by contrast, returned each evening to her modest studio on Lake Union, a single room barely large enough for a futon, a desk, and a kitchenette. Her possessions were practical: a yoga mat, a thrifted bookshelf, a stack of professional certifications. Nothing here hinted at the luxuries enjoyed by her employers. She had trained for years at Cascade Learning Center, pouring herself into behavior analysis, developing individual education plans, and celebrating every incremental success with children whose lives had once been defined by chaos. Yet clinical successes felt ephemeral. At the Carter residence, success wore a different face. It came as laughter and soft touches, as the gentle pride in Jason's eyes when Ethan mastered a new breathing exercise. That pride, Zoe realized with a pang, was directed at her and at the family she served, not at herself. Her envy had first taken root on the day Amanda offered to include her in the spa's social media updates. Photos of Zoe guiding Ethan in mindfulness bubbles, captions praising her creativity. She had turned the screen off with discomfort, telling herself, "I'm not here to bask in the spotlight. I'm here to help." Yet each like, each positive comment, kindled a rush of adrenaline. She replayed Linda's post, one of Amanda's regular clients, thanking Zoe by name for her patience and warmth, and felt her pulse quicken. Curled on her futon that evening, Zoe scrolled through Amanda's lifestyle blog. A recent post entitled "Mindful Mornings with My Son" featured a photograph of Amanda cradling Ethan as he sipped warm milk. Zoe's thumb hovered over the screen. She longed to craft a comment more profound than a simple "love this," but stopped herself. Instead, the rush of envy flared. Why does she have the time and the connection to do all this? Zoe whispered to the empty room. The more Zoe observed the seamless interactions between mother, father, and child, the more she felt a fissure between her professional identity and the yearning stirring within her. She had come to Seattle chasing a calling, to make a difference in the lives of children with special needs, but the Carters offered more than purpose. They offered belonging. Their home, their lifestyle, their sense of community, all seemed attainable if only she could secure a foothold. By midweek, that longing had crystallized into ambition. 5 o'clock on a gusty Thursday. Zoe paused at the threshold of the Carter dining room. Ethan sat contentedly at the table, his mac and cheese precisely divided into 2 halves. He beamed at Zoe, and she felt a stab of something that was not quite pride. It was desire, a wish to be recognized not as an employee, but as a valued member of the family. Her breath caught as Jason paused in the doorway, offering his son an approving nod before turning to Zoe. The unspoken message was clear. "Thank you." Zoe almost said, "I deserve more than gratitude." Instead, she smiled and bent to refill Ethan's water glass, her mind racing with possibilities. That night she worked on a new enrichment plan, a rotational sensory box, an adaptive obstacle course for the living room, a digital log of Ethan's quantitative progress. She toiled until her fingers ached, knowing Amanda would praise her initiative. Praise, Zoe realized, was intoxicating, a validation far richer than any certificate pinned on her wall. As the clock struck midnight, she drafted a gentle message to Amanda. "I've prepared a new chart to map Ethan's daily victories. Let me know if you'd like to review it tomorrow." She pressed send and felt a thrill of power course through her veins. Yet with every small victory came the nagging question, is this enough? In her small apartment, the silence stretched intolerably. She pictured herself in the Carters' living room, curled up on one of the plush sofas with a glass of herbal tea, the gentle hum of conversation around her. She craved more than a paycheck. She wanted the warmth of belonging, the status of confidence, the unspoken respect that came with being indispensable. In the days that followed, Zoe refined her tactics. She learned Jason's morning routine, discreetly timing her own errands to coincide with the moments he might cross the spa's threshold before heading to the office. She curated thoughtful text messages for Amanda, links to parenting articles, suggestions for healthy snack recipes, each crafted to underscore her commitment. With Ethan, she introduced Zoe's Quiet Corner, a reading nook complete with noise-canceling headphones and a battery of fidget toys that kept him engaged for unprecedented spans of time. Amanda noticed. She pulled Zoe aside one afternoon and said, "You've created something really special here. I can't tell you how much relief that brings me." Relief. Zoe tasted that word as if it were honey. One evening, after a particularly successful bedtime story session, complete with voice modulation, character accents, and strategic pauses, Zoe lingered in the doorway. Jason, returning early from a fundraiser, stepped into the hallway barefoot, his dutiful tie loosened at the collar. Ethan, half asleep, reached out and offered his small hand. Jason ruffled his son's hair and faced Zoe. The soft light from the hallway lamp cast a halo around his silhouette. She could almost hear her own heartbeat echo in the hush. "You did great tonight," he said quietly to Zoe, his tone tinged with something she hadn't detected before, something more than professional courtesy. She nodded, her pulse stuttering. "Thank you," she managed, her voice soft. And in that small exchange, Zoe felt a boundary crack. She thought if I wanted to, I could step across that line. The thought was dangerous, electric. But she held herself back, reminding herself of her careful plan. She would not risk open impropriety. Instead, she filed the moment away, a trophy of emotional capital. She reminded herself that ambition required patience. Build trust, amplify value, become indispensable. Only then could she decide how far to push her newfound leverage. Back at her apartment, Zoe sat at her desk and opened a fresh document titled Zoe's Long-Term Vision. She began to outline steps: deepen bonds, secure trust, expand responsibilities, test boundaries, and finally, redefine her role within the Carter household. She wrote the words deliberately, as if etching a pact with herself. "I will become more than a caregiver. I will become family." She paused, coming face to face with the enormity of her own ambition. A dull ache of guilt surfaced. This plan risked everything she had built in her career and her personal integrity. But the thrill of possibility washed over her, loud and insistent. As Seattle's lights glittered through her window, Zoe let out a slow breath. Tomorrow, she would unveil the next stage of her strategy, a pilot enrichment workshop for Ethan's small group of friends, held right in the Carter living room. She would invite the neighbors, photograph the session, and present it as proof of her unique ability to transform ordinary spaces into dynamic learning environments. She closed her laptop and lay back on her futon, the glow of the city below mingling with the flickering streetlights. In the quiet, she whispered into the dark, "I'm ready." And in that solitary affirmation, Zoe Bennett sealed her fate, embraced her envy, and stoked the fires of an ambition that would steer her path, one calculated step at a time, into territories she knew she should not tread. Zoe Bennett stood in the dimly lit hallway just outside the Carters' spacious kitchen, the soft hum of the refrigerator blending with a faint tick of the wall clock. It was a Friday evening, and Amanda Carter had insisted on attending a charity gala in Redmond. Jason Miller, her husband, had a late board meeting in Bellevue. Zoe watched them depart through the wide glass door. Amanda in an elegant navy sheath, her hair softly curled, her smile gracious as she waved goodbye. Jason in a crisp suit, tie straight, briefcase in hand, offering Zoe a nod of thanks. As the door clicked shut behind them, Zoe's pulse quickened. This was the moment she had been waiting for. She inhaled deeply, smoothing the lapels of her blazer and reminding herself of the script she had rehearsed all day. Her plan hinged on a single, seemingly accidental moment of vulnerability. Jason extending compassion and concern, unwittingly revealing his true feelings toward her in private. She ducked into the living room and began setting the stage. The soft glow of the evening sun filtered through sheer curtains as Zoe positioned a plush throw pillow atop the edge of the low coffee table. She had placed a stack of children's books on either side to heighten the illusion, a catchable obstacle should Ethan's ball bounce too close. Next, she arranged 2 cups of chamomile tea on a tray near the sofa, one for Ethan's bedtime wind down, one ostensibly for Jason. Everything looked innocently domestic. From her purse, she retrieved a small audio recorder, no bigger than a deck of cards, that she had meticulously concealed beneath a decorative coaster. She tested the battery indicator with a muted click, then slipped it behind the cushion where it would remain entirely out of sight. In her mind's eye, she saw the scene play out. A misplaced step, a sudden yelp, a protective rush, and the candid words she needed to capture. It was simple theater, one carefully choreographed fall that would blur the line between mistake and design. Ethan bounded into the room, already clutching his beloved basketball, his energy barely contained. "Zoe, can we do shooting practice before bed?" he asked, shoving the ball toward her with a grin. Zoe placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Sure thing, buddy. Give me just a moment to finish this tea, for Mr. Miller." She pointed toward the empty seat on the sofa. "Jason should be back any minute." Ethan bounced the ball behind him as Zoe took a slow, deliberate sip from her cup, feigning obliviousness to her true agenda. The house remained hushed except for the faint roar of traffic on the avenue below. Zoe set her cup down gingerly, the faint clink mimicking a glass nearly slipping from her grasp. She let her fingers tremble slightly, enough to suggest a loss of control. Ethan started dribbling at the far end of the room, aiming for an impromptu hoop made of a laundry basket. Zoe took another slow sip, then placed her free hand on the table's edge for support. The next moment was crucial. She nudged the tray closer to the table's corner, ensuring that the coaster concealing the recorder would slide toward the brink. With measured grace, she shifted her weight to one foot and allowed the tray to tilt just enough that the coaster and its hidden device would slide imperceptibly behind her. In that instant, her fingertips brushed the ceramic edge, and she limped forward as though unbalanced, lips parting in a soft gasp. It was the perfect accident, unplanned, urgent, requiring immediate aid. Almost on cue, footsteps approached the front door as Jason arrived home earlier than expected. The click of keys in the lock echoed through the foyer. Zoe's heart pounded in her chest. She turned, arms outstretched, and let her body tilt fully, feigning a slip. With a startled cry, "Oh!" she plunged forward, coming to rest with one hand braced against the polished wood floor. Ethan froze mid-dribble, eyes wide. The recorder, nestled behind the cushion, sprang to life with an inaudible whisper of activation. Jason's voice broke the silence.
"Zoe?
"Are you okay?" He was already halfway across the room, concern etching his features. They both heard the crash of Zoe's faux stumble, prompting Jason to reach her side in 2 strides. He knelt beside her, one hand on her forearm, the other hovering protectively near her shoulder. "What happened?" "I heard a crash." His voice was low, urgent. He scanned the scene, spilled tea on the carpet, the tray upturned, books knocked askew, and his gaze landed on Zoe's face, pale but illuminated by relief at his presence. "Just lost my balance," Zoe murmured, her voice trembling with the right mix of vulnerability. My ankle twisted under me." She pressed a gloved hand to her inside wrist, as though assessing a real sprain. Jason's brow furrowed. He gently took her hand, examining it with tender concern. "Let me help you up," he said softly. He stood and extended his arm, offering a steadying grip. Zoe leaned into him, her head tipping at the perfect emotional angle as he eased her to her feet. The recorder, positioned inches from their interaction, captured every nuance, the sincerity in Jason's tone, the tenderness in his touch, the slight quiver in Zoe's voice. Under the soft lamplight, Jason brushed a stray lock of hair from Zoe's face. "You really had me worried," he confessed. "I thought something worse had happened." Zoe's shoulders shook as she laughed softly, feigning embarrassment. "I'm so clumsy," she whispered. letting her eyes close briefly as though overwhelmed by gratitude. Jason's face softened, a warmth spreading behind his eyes. "You're doing amazing work with Ethan," he said, voice rich with earnest admiration. His words lingered in the air like a confession. "I don't know what we'd do without you." Zoe inhaled, capturing the sensation of his closeness. The crisp scent of his aftershave, the steady beat of his heart through his well-tailored jacket. Almost unconsciously, Jason brushed his thumb across her knuckles, lingering a fraction longer than necessary. Zoe registered the moment, her breath catching. She let her hand rest in his palm, not pulling away. The recorder continued to capture every syllable, every sigh, every heartbeat-shaped pause. Zoe's pulse raced with triumph. This evidence, Jason's candid praise, his protectiveness, the touch that spoke volumes, was the key to securing her ambitions. With the scene firmly captured, Zoe gently disentangled herself. "I'll be fine in a moment," she assured him, straightening her collar. She turned, retrieved 2 damp towels from a cabinet, and handed one to Jason. "Can you help me blot this?" she asked, nodding toward the tea stain on the carpet. Jason nodded, still holding her gaze for a heartbeat longer than necessary. As they cleaned, he kept a steady conversation, asking about Amanda's gala, inquiring if Ethan had homework, and recommending a favorite local restaurant where Amanda and he could grab a late dinner. His tone was intimately warm, the kind reserved for family. Once the stain was lifted, Jason guided Zoe back to the sofa. He placed a supportive arm around her shoulders and handed her a clean, steaming mug of herbal tea he'd fetched from the kitchen. Without thinking, Zoe pressed the cushion beneath her and tapped the coaster, ensuring the recorder stayed perfectly concealed. Jason sank onto the adjacent seat, casually close. "I'll stay with you until you feel better," he said. "You saved our son from an upset, Zoe. You deserve better than a simple thank you." Zoe's lips curved into a genuine smile, a performance so perfect that even she felt its sincerity. "Thank you," she replied, her voice steady now, a hint of triumph hidden beneath warmth. Later, after Jason had escorted Ethan to the bedroom and called Amanda to assure her of Zoe's safety, he returned to the living room. With a half-smile tinged by exhaustion, he found Zoe arranging cushions on the sofa arm. "I really should get going," he said softly, his voice echoing her own carefully crafted tone from that first day. Zoe stood, every inch the image of composed gratitude. She reached out and gently straightened his tie. "Be safe on your ride," she whispered. Jason paused, leaning in to brush her cheek with his thumb, a gesture he might pull back at any moment, yet he held it an instant longer than proper. Then he straightened, nodded, and headed for the door. As the front door clicked shut, Zoe exhaled a quiet laugh. She crossed to the couch, retrieved the coaster-laden recorder, and pressed stop. She lifted it to her ear, replaying the crucial moments. Jason's protective "let me help you up," his admiration-laced praise, the soft brush of his thumb across her knuckles, the lingering words, "You deserve better than a simple thank you." Each nuance validated her plan. She transferred the file to her phone, a secret trophy of her orchestration. Later that night, Zoe sat at her desk in the semi-darkness of her apartment, illuminated only by the glow of her laptop screen. She labeled the file Session 4, Confession, and filed it under encrypted folders. As she reviewed the recording, a thrill of power and possibility pulsed through her. She had captured evidence of Jason's vulnerability, his genuine affection, and the spark she needed to fan into a blaze. The path ahead was clearer than ever. With this proof, she could undermine Amanda's trust and become indispensable to Jason in ways no nanny had ever dared. Zoe leaned back, her gaze fixed on the photograph taped above her desk, a candid snapshot of her high-fiving Ethan after a successful breathing session. Now, bolstered by Jason's unscripted praise and intimacy, that photo took on new meaning. She whispered into the quiet room, "Tomorrow, everything changes." And with the faint echo of her own voice bouncing off the walls, Zoe closed her laptop, already mapping out the next move in her carefully constructed strategy. Zoe Bennett had rehearsed every detail in her mind until it felt as inevitable as breathing. She knew Amanda Carter would be at the Redmond Gala, Jason Miller tied up in evening meetings, and Ethan's bedtime routine left vulnerable. By 6 p.m., she parked her unobtrusive cherry-red electric sedan behind the Volunteer Park Conservatory, its shadow half hidden beneath the wide branches of an old sycamore. The manila envelope, crammed with $800,000 in sealed plastic bundles of $100 bills, lay flat on the passenger seat. A few minutes later, Ethan Carter appeared at the park's wrought iron gate. He wore his bright yellow raincoat, despite the clear sky, and a striped backpack, in Zoe's carefully crafted story. They were out for a special adventure before bedtime. He skipped toward her, trusting and unafraid. She knelt, brushing a stray lock from his forehead. "Ready for our surprise?" she asked gently. He nodded, wide-eyed. Together they walked past the silent fountain and up to her car. Once Ethan was buckled into the back seat, Zoe tapped a text on her phone. 2 words to Jason Miller. "Bring the money." She started the silent electric motor. The moment she rolled forward, Jason's echoing footsteps followed behind them. Zoe accelerated toward the southwest exit. Ethan turned to wave at an empty bench. She glanced in the rearview mirror and saw Jason materialize beside the car, panting, one hand extended. Zoe swerved smoothly to the curb beneath a street lamp. Jason yanked open the passenger door and clutched the envelope. Ethan peeked between the front seats, bewildered. "Mommy," he began. Zoe placed a calming hand on his shoulder. "Jason says it's okay. Let's go home, champ." She caught Jason's eye. He looked pallid, caught between relief and fury. He nodded numbly. Zoe pulled back onto the road. Ethan recapped the adventure. "We'll do this again, right?" As though nothing was amiss, she steered through the park drive, guided by the glow of the distant city skyline until she reached the Carter driveway on Madrona Hills. Amanda's door was slightly ajar. Zoe parked, unbuckled Ethan, and led him inside. The foyer was dark, except for the soft spill of light from the family room. Amanda, still in her gala gown, emerged clutching her phone. Relief crashed over her face as she scooped Ethan into her arms. "Oh my God, baby, are you safe?" she sobbed. Jason stood beside her, envelope in hand, jaw clenched. Zoe stepped back, arms loose at her sides.
"He's fine."
"Jason has what he wanted," she said softly. "He asked me to return Ethan in exchange for this." She pointed to the envelope on a narrow console table. Amanda stared at the money, then at her husband, then down at her son. Jason's shoulders slumped, the wordless admission that he'd had no choice. Before Amanda could protest, Zoe slipped out into the night, leaving the door wide. She crept back to her car, scanning the quiet neighborhood. As she slid behind the wheel, Ethan's words drifted from the open door. "Mommy, that was fun." Amanda's gasp of horror followed Zoe onto the street. Zoe turned onto Lakeview Avenue. Halfway home, her phone buzzed, an anonymous tip to 911. Child abduction in progress at Volunteer Park. Sirens flared suddenly behind her. Zoe's heart hammered as she hit the brake. Red and blue lights danced across her windshield. She pulled over. Ethan's head peeked over the seat. "What's happening?" he whispered. "Just a little traffic stop," Zoe lied. She opened her door before the patrol car pulled up. 2 officers approached, guns holstered, badges gleaming. "Ma'am, step away from the vehicle," one ordered. Zoe raised her hands. "I'm Zoe Bennett," she said, voice steady. "I'm the caretaker." The officer's partner unlatched Ethan's car seat and handed the frightened boy into Jason's arms, arriving breathless behind the cruiser. As officers cuffed Zoe, Jason wrapped Ethan in his arms and hurried them inside. The manila envelope, now empty, lay abandoned on the back seat. Zoe's expression, for a moment, flickered with regret. Then she steeled herself. Her plan had succeeded in one sense. She'd forced Jason's hand. But now, she faced the consequences she had long anticipated. In the precinct's fluorescent interrogation room, Detective Marcia Rivera trotted out the charges: first-degree kidnapping, second-degree extortion, child endangerment, and all supported by Zoe's own texts, the park surveillance footage, witness testimony, and Jason's 911 call. Zoe confessed calmly, outlining her desperate bid for security. Her detailed statement, recorded on camera, sealed the case. Within hours, the story exploded across Seattle headlines. Nanny turned kidnapper, $800,000 ransom attempted in high-profile Carter case. Amanda and Jason expressed relief and devastation, emphasizing Ethan's safety amid bitter betrayal. As Zoe was booked and her fingerprints scanned, a final thought crossed her mind. She had aimed to claim a place in the Carter family. Instead, she had lost every shred of her carefully constructed identity. Behind the steel doors closing on her, she saw the manila envelope disappear, an empty monument to the price of her ambition. That night, in a holding cell, Zoe silently vowed, this would not be the end of her story. The trial was inevitable, but the lessons she'd forcefully learned about trust, power, and consequence would shape whatever came next. The doors of the King County Courthouse swung open to a brisk March morning as Zoe Bennett was led into the cavernous hallway. Reporters crowded around the entrance, their cameras clicking and microphones thrust forward, but Zoe's gaze remained fixed on the polished marble floor. She wore a simple charcoal suit, no flash of color, no pretense. At exactly 9 a.m., the bailiff called her case, and Zoe rose to face the bench with measured calm. The courtroom itself was an elegant blend of dark wood paneling and muted green walls, seating packed with curious onlookers, friends and foes alike. Judge Marisol Campos entered, her robes whispering across the floor. She acknowledged both tables with a nod before settling behind her desk. Zoe's attorney, Malcolm Reeves, gave her a brief, encouraging look. Across the aisle, Senior Deputy Prosecuting Attorney Geraldine Wu arranged her exhibits, printed transcripts of Zoe's confession, a thumb drive containing the ransom exchange recording, the manila envelope seized from Zoe's car, and the park surveillance video. The bailiff called the jury to order, and Geraldine Wu rose to deliver her opening statement. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, the evidence will show that on the night of November 12th, the defendant, Zoe Bennett, knowingly and willfully abducted a 5-year-old child from his own home and coerced the child's parents to pay $800,000 in ransom. She manipulated a trusting child, exploited her position as caregiver, and shattered the security every family deserves. As she spoke, the surveillance footage appeared on the large screen, Zoe guiding Ethan into her sedan, Jason chasing after them, the exchange at Volunteer Park, all captured in chilling clarity. When Geraldine Wu finished, Malcolm Reeves stood. Members of the jury, he said, what you will see is a mind broken by desperation. My client, Zoe Bennett, dedicated years to helping children with special needs. On that single night, she overstepped the bounds of trust in a moment of crisis, not from malice, but from an overwhelming fear for her own future. We do not dispute the facts of what happened, but I ask you to consider motive, remorse, and capacity for change. Punish her too harshly, and you extinguish the possibility that she might one day atone by using her gifts for genuine service. The prosecution's first witness was Detective Marcia Rivera, who described interviewing Zoe in a stark interrogation room. She recounted how Zoe had calmly outlined her plan, staging an adventure for Ethan, luring Jason into a ransom exchange, and fleeing until sirens forced her surrender. Rivera played the audio clip of Zoe's confession, her voice unwavering, almost clinical. As the last words faded, the courtroom hung heavy with the gravity of her betrayal. Next, the security technician from Seattle Parks presented the CCTV timeline. Zoe parking under the sycamore, Ethan climbing into the sedan, Jason arriving on foot, the exchange, and Zoe's drive back. Each timestamp confirmed Zoe's premeditation, her meticulous orchestration of every step. The jury watched, transfixed, as Zoe's expression remained inscrutable. Jason Miller took the stand and delivered the most visceral testimony. His normally authoritative tone cracked as he described seeing Ethan's trusting smile vanish when Zoe's car door clicked shut. He recounted the 911 call, the frantic plunge through the park, and the moment he found his son unhurt but bewildered. "I felt my world fracture," Jason said, voice thick with emotion. "The person I trusted most betrayed us. My son's safety was his only concern, that I cannot forgive myself for failing him that night." Amanda Carter followed. She spoke of Zoe's early success. Nights when her hyperactive son finally slept through, days when temper tantrums were soothed by Zoe's structured routine. Then came the horror of discovering the ransom envelope on her console table, the betrayal slicing through her relief. In tears, Amanda described hugging Ethan, desperate to reassure him, while her heart broke for the trust shattered between caregiver and child. Defense character witnesses painted a contrasting portrait. A parent from Cascade Learning Center testified to Zoe's unwavering dedication and skill. A special ed teacher spoke of Zoe's professionalism, her volunteer work, and glowing reviews from families over 5 years. They admitted shock at her actions, but insisted Zoe's record before the incident demonstrated deep compassion, not criminal intent. Closing arguments ignited the air. Geraldine Wu invoked the fundamental duty to protect children, demanding accountability commensurate with the suffering inflicted. Malcolm Reeves urged mercy, citing Zoe's potential to transform remorse into rehabilitation. After 2 days of deliberation, the jury returned a guilty verdict on both first-degree kidnapping and second-degree extortion. Zoe's shoulders slumped as she stood, the foreperson's voice echoing in her ears. 2 weeks later, Judge Campos presided over sentencing. In a room filled with silence and hushed grief, she acknowledged the gravity of Zoe's transgressions, but also the letters attesting to Zoe's earlier good works and her cooperation with law enforcement. The judge imposed 8 years in the Washington State Reformatory, followed by 5 years of supervised release, forbidding any future work with minors or in caregiving. As the gavel fell, Zoe closed her eyes, accepting the sentence without protest. Outside, Amanda and Jason, hand in hand, stepped into the afternoon sun, a fragile but hopeful front. Ethan, safe and unaware of courtroom proceedings, waited at home for a new caregiver, his laughter echoing in their renewed lives. In the months that followed, the Carters rebuilt. They hired a licensed, certified nanny through a reputable agency. Friday nights became family game nights. Tuesday mornings, joint mindfulness exercises in Amanda's newly launched family wellness program. Ethan, now 6, thrived, his creativity unfettered by the memory of that night. Behind bars, Zoe Bennett confronted her choices. She volunteered in the prison library, tutoring inmates with learning challenges, and attended every counseling session available. She wrote apology letters, never sent, to the Carters and mentored fellow prisoners through restorative justice workshops. Each act of service chipped away at her ambition-born betrayal, forging a path toward genuine redemption. When Zoe walked free 8 years later, she stepped into a city changed by time, but not by hope. She carried with her nothing of her past life, no credentials, no illusions, but a nascent understanding that true care, unlike coerced gratitude, grows from unbreakable bonds of trust, forged through integrity and compassion. And in the quiet, sunlit streets of Seattle, both the Carters and Zoe, in their separate journeys, found renewal in the knowledge that forgiveness and accountability can coexist, and that from the deepest wounds, new strength can emerge. And that brings us to the end of today's story on Truistery Vibes. Don't forget to leave a comment with a quote or moment that touched you the most. Your words give our team the motivation to keep creating more heartfelt stories. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you again soon.